Good afternoon. This is Coach Jackson from Dorina, and I thought I might start reading a book to you. One of my favorite Roald Dahl books of all time is the book Matilda. There's also a great movie starring Danny DeVito and a lot of other famous actors in that movie, but the books are always so much better than the movie. Here's a little prologue. Roald Dahl was a spy, ace fighter pilot, chocolate historian, and medical inventor. He was also the author of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Matilda, the BFG, and many more brilliant stories. He remains the world's #1 storyteller. Now, his illustrator, which is the person who drew the pictures, his name is Quentin Blake. Quentin Blake has illustrated more than 300 books and was Roald Dahl's favorite illustrator. In 1980, he won the prestigious Kate Greenaway Medal. In 1999, he became the first ever children's laureate, and in 2013, he was knighted for services to illustration. Here is Roald Dahl, and here is Quentin Blake. Now, in our story, Matilda, we have many characters. Some of our most important characters are Matilda, Michael, her parents Mr. and Mrs. Wormwood, the beautiful Miss Honey, Bruce Bogtrotter, who likes cake a little too much, Amanda Thripp, and the evil Miss Trunchbull. Let's get started. Chapter number 1. The reader of the books. It's a funny thing about mothers and fathers. Even when their own child is the most disgusting little blister you could ever imagine, they still think that he or she is wonderful. Some parents go further. They become so blinded by adoration, they manage to convince themselves their child has qualities of genius. Well, there is nothing very wrong with all of this. It's the way of the world. It is only when the parents begin telling us about the brilliance of their revolting offspring that we start shouting, "Bring us a basin! We're gonna be sick!" School teachers suffer a good deal from having to listen to this sort of twaddle from proud parents, but they usually get their own back when the time comes to write the end of term reports. If I were a teacher, I would cook up some real scorchers for the children of doting parents. Your son Maximilian, I would write, is a total washout. I hope you have a family business you can push him into when he leaves school, because he sure as heck won't get a job anywhere else. Or if I were feeling lyrical that day, I might write, "It is a curious truth that grasshoppers have their hearing organs in the sides of the abdomen. Your daughter Vanessa, judging by what she's learned this term, has no hearing organs at all." I might even delve deeper into natural history and say, the periodical cicada spends 6 years as a grub underground, and no more than 6 days as a free creature of sunlight and air. Your son Wilfred has spent 6 years as a grub in this school, and we are still waiting for him to emerge from the chrysalis. A particularly poisonous little girl might sting me into saying, "Fiona has the same glacial beauty as an iceberg, but unlike the iceberg, she has absolutely nothing below the surface." I think I might enjoy writing end-of-term reports for the stinkers in my class. But enough of that. We have to get on. Occasionally one comes across parents who take the opposite line, who show no interest at all in their children. And these, of course, are far worse than the doting ones. Mr. and Mrs. Wormwood were two such parents. They had a son called Michael and a daughter called Matilda. And the parents looked upon Matilda in particular as nothing more than a scab. A scab is something you have to put up with until the time comes when you can pick it off and flick it away. Mr. and Mrs. Wormwood looked forward enormously to time when they could pick their little daughter off and flick her away, preferably into the next county or even farther than that. It is bad enough when parents treat ordinary children as though they were scabs and bunions, but it becomes somehow a lot worse when the child in question is extraordinary. And by that I mean sensitive and brilliant. Matilda was both of these things, but above all, she was brilliant. Her mind was so nimble and she was so quick to learn that her ability should have been obvious even to the most half-witted of parents. But Mr. and Mrs. Wormwood were both so gormless and so wrapped up in their own silly little lives they failed to notice anything unusual about their daughter. To tell the truth, I doubt they would have noticed that had she crawled into the house with a broken leg. Matilda's brother Michael was a perfectly normal boy, but the sister, as I said, was something to make your eyes pop. By the age of 1.5, her speech was perfect, and she knew as many words as most grown-ups. The parents, instead of applauding her a noisy chatterbox, called her a noisy chatterbox and told her sharply that small girls should be seen and not heard. By the time she was 3, Matilda had taught herself to read by studying newspapers and magazines that lay around the house. At the age of 4, she could read fast and well, and she naturally began hankering after books. The only book in the whole of this enlightened household was something called Easy Cooking, belonging to her mother. And when she had read this from cover to cover and had learnt all the recipes by heart, she decided she wanted something more interesting. As you notice in the picture, what is she reading now besides the cooking magazine? "Daddy," she said, "do you think you could buy me a book?" "A book?" he said. "What do you want a flaming book for?" "Well, to read, Daddy. What's wrong with the telly, for heaven's sake? We've got a lovely telly with a 12-inch screen, and now you come asking for a book? You're getting spoiled, my girl." Nearly every weekday afternoon, Matilda was left alone in the house. Her brother, 5 years older than her, went to school. Her father went to work. And their mother went out playing bingo in a town 8 miles away. Miss Wormwood was hooked on bingo and played it 5 afternoons a week. On the afternoon of the day when her father had refused to buy her a book, Matilda set out all by herself to walk to the public library in the village. When she arrived, she introduced herself to the librarian, Miss Phelps. She asked if she might sit a while and read a book. Miss Phelps, slightly taken aback at the arrival of such a tiny girl, unaccompanied by a parent, nevertheless told her she was very welcome. Where are the children's books, please?" Matilda asked. "They're over there on those lower shelves," Miss Phelps told her. "Would you like me to help you find a nice one with lots of pictures in it?" No, thank you," Matilda said. "I'm sure I can manage." From then on, every afternoon, as soon as her mother had left for bingo, Matilda would toddle down to the library. The walk took only 10 minutes, and this allowed her 2 glorious hours sitting quietly by herself in a cozy corner devouring one book after another. When she had read every single children's book in the place, she started wandering around in search of something else. Miss Phelps, who had been watching her with fascination for the past few weeks, now got up from her desk and went over to her. "Can I help you, Matilda?" she asked. I'm just wondering what to read next," Matilda said. "I finished all the children's books." "You mean you've looked at all the pictures?" "Yes, but I've read the books as well." Miss Phelps looked down at Matilda from her great height, and Matilda looked right back up at her. "I thought some were very poor," Matilda said, "but others were lovely. I liked The Secret Garden best of all. It was full of mystery. The mystery of the room behind the closed door, and the mystery of the garden behind the big wall." Miss Phelps was stunned. "Exactly how old are you, Matilda?" she asked. "Oh, 4 years and 3 months, Matilda said. Miss Phelps was more stunned than ever, but she had the sense not to show it. "What sort of a book would you like to read next?" she asked. Matilda said, "I would like a really good one that grown-ups read, a famous one. I don't know any names." Miss Phelps looked along the shelves, taking her time. She didn't quite know what to bring out. How, she asked herself, does one choose a famous grown-up book for a 4-year-old girl? Her first thought was to pick a young teenager's romance, of the kind that is written for 15-year-old schoolgirls. But for some reason, she found herself instinctively walking past that particular shelf. "Try this," she said at last. "It's very famous and very good. If it's too long for you, just let me know, and I'll find something shorter and a bit easier." "Great Expectations," Matilda read, "by Charles Dickens. I'd love to try it." "I must be mad," Miss Phelps told herself. But to Matilda she said, "Of course, you may try it." Over the next few afternoons, Miss Phelps could hardly take her eyes from the small girl sitting for hour after hour in the big armchair at the far end of the room with the book on her lap. Here's a picture, guys, of the librarian and Matilda. It was necessary to rest on the lap because it was too heavy for her to hold up, which meant she had to sit leaning forward in order to read. And a strange sight it was. This tiny, dark-haired person sitting there with her feet nowhere near touching the floor, totally absorbed in the wonderful adventures of Pip and old Miss Havisham in her cobwebbed house, and by the spell of magic that Dickens, the great storyteller, had woven with his words. The only movement from the reader was lifting up the hand every now and then to turn over a page, and Miss Phelps always felt sad when the time came for her to cross the floor and say, "It's 10 to 5, Matilda." During the first week of Matilda's visits, Miss Phelps had said to her, "Does your mother walk you down here every day and then take you home?" My mother goes to Aylesbury every afternoon to play bingo," Matilda had said. "She doesn't know I come here." "But that's surely not right," Miss Phelps said. "I think you'd better ask her." "I'd rather not," Matilda said. "She doesn't encourage reading books, nor does my father. But what do they expect you to do every afternoon in the empty house? Just mooch around and watch the telly." Well, I see. "She doesn't really care what I do," Matilda said a little sadly. Miss Phelps was concerned about the child's safety. On the walk through the fairly busy village, High Street and the crossing of the road, but she decided not to intervene. Within a week, Matilda had finished Great Expectations, which in that edition contained 411 pages. "I loved it," she said to Miss Phelps. "Has Mr. Dickens written any others?" "Oh, a great number," said the astounded Miss Phelps. "Shall I choose you another?" And that's where we're going to end today for day number 1 of Matilda. Tune in tomorrow for day number 2. We'll see everybody then. Bye, everybody.